So when I think about my early days in personal training, one of the things that came up quite a bit was, and I think this actually happened a little bit before that. So even when I was doing food service and whatnot, we had like that big moment in time where absolutely everybody was avoiding gluten because gluten was the new fad, big bad, that everybody was just gluten intolerant. Oh my God, gluten is so bad for your gut. There's not a whole lot of evidence to suggest that that's the thing. And, you know, it kind of seems to be a general fad where people are looking at different people in very special circumstances that have sensitivities, and it's an easy thing for us to go ahead and reach, click, or whatever, and just say, okay, this is my problem, and this is the easy solution that solves my problem, and so they latch onto these things. And I think that a lot of like our keto right now issues are coming out of that, where people are looking at epileptics and saying, oh, they're so thin, this is something that must be working, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to keto. And the same thing was true with gluten intolerances, and I know that there's immediately going to be somebody in the comments that's just going to be like, oh, I can't have gluten, I have a non-celiac gluten allergy, which, celiac's kind of the allergy. It's the immune system attacking the gut because it's trying to attack the gluten proteins, and that is pretty much by definition a gluten allergic response. It may be a different type of allergic response than, say, your throat swelling shut and you go into anaphylaxis. If that's what's happening to you, then I'm terribly sorry to hear that that's happening to you. It's totally possible for that to happen, but with celiac specifically, it's because the stomach lining becomes so inflamed because of all the immune cells attacking the gut lining. You lose your ability to uptake nutrients, and so then you start becoming, malnourished. So it is very problematic. And I was actually working with people at 24 Hour Fitness who trainers and whatnot. One of them happened to have celiac disease, and the way that they test this is usually done through a blood test. I think there's more than one test, but again, I'm not a doctor, and when we go into what I have to say from here on out, do bear in mind that I am a personal trainer. I am not a doctor. I am not a gastroenterologist, and but a lot of what I am going to be talking about is actually coming out of life experience as well. So allergies are definitely one of those things that you need to be talking to your doctor about, getting tested for that, and that can be another thing that can affect gut health. The other thing that can affect gut health can be antibiotic use. And it's one of the things that I'm getting a little bit nervous about in this day and age where we are using doxyprep because you are taking an antibiotic, and even if the studies have shown that there's no antibiotic resistance that we're introducing or giving to STIs, and that doxyprep is not the doxycycline is not what we normally treat STIs with anyways. And I keep saying we, I mean us as a society, not necessarily that I'm a doctor. And so, it is potentially the lesser of two evils. I still think that condom use and conversations are some of the better ways of kind of mitigating the risk of getting an STI. But anytime that we use a antibiotic, the first place that antibiotic is going to hit is going to be your stomach, and it's going to kill off your good bacteria that is in your stomach that actually helps you to break down your foods. And one of the things that you could potentially get is lactose intolerance, for example. There's new research that's coming out that's suggesting that lactose intolerance may actually be a bacterial. You don't have enough of a specific bacteria that's breaking down the lactose, and then it's making it down to the lower part of your digestive tract, your colon, and then it's the unbroken down lactose is getting eaten by another type of bacteria that is off-gassing, which is causing that bloated feeling, that's causing overactivity in your bowels and stuff like that. So you could actually potentially develop that from using an antibiotic. And so, besides, the bacterial risk of having superbugs basically being created by using too much antibiotics, we also have what is it going to be doing to our digestive tracts as well as even our immune systems. And so that is yet another thing that can lead to issues in our digestive tract. And then there's a bacteria that is one of the leading causes for ulcers and gastritis. Gastritis is just an inflammation of the stomach, and that is called H. pylori. So if you are having frequent heartburn or things like that, it might be something that you'd want to talk to your doctor about, because then you can get tested for H. pylori, and then they might put you on an antibiotic to kill the H. pylori. And oftentimes when they do put you on antibiotics, they want you to go onto a probiotic. And I've heard some people argue more in favor of a prebiotic versus a probiotic. Basically, what a prebiotic does is the food that makes your gut more hospitable to the types of bacteria that you want in your gut, whereas a probiotic is going to be more of introducing more of those bacterium to your stomach. But the thing about probiotics that's a little bit iffy is that we don't have like some magic ladle that we can scoop out your stomach acid and your stomach lining and like check for which bacteria that you have, especially partially because there's just too many different strains of bacteria that we don't even know what they do that are found within your gut. And so taking a lot of a probiotic where you are introducing a helpful bacteria into your gut, one of the things that they're finding is that it's actually forcing out the population of that good bacteria that you're putting in there from the probiotic, is forcing out other good bacteria, and what you really, really need in your gut is going to be that diversity. So I want to circle back a little bit to gastritis, acid reflux, and things like that, because there is an important thing to talk about there. And honestly, I found that the thing that helped with my gastritis the most, besides not copying the movies and when I was working on my Volkswagen Beetle and, hose siphoning up the gasoline, yes, I did that. Yes, it was dumb. Did it give me gastritis? Probably. There's a couple things else I could have done it, but that was a really miserable 48 hours where you're just burping up gasoline. It was terrible. Don't ever do that. But anyways, so the way that they generally will treat gastritis is through different types of ways of mitigating the amount of acid that is in your stomach. And, the theory is that acid is working its way back up to your esophagus and burning your esophagus, and can eventually burn a hole in your esophagus. And so they will generally use, you've seen Tums, Rolaids, those are acid reducers. And then you have Pepsid, which I'm not exactly sure what the mechanism is on that. Famotine is the other name for it. And then there are the aprosols. When I say that, because there's like a lasoprosol, there's omeprazole, things like that. And that class is called what's called a proton pump inhibitor. And what that does is it actually stops you from producing as much stomach acid, which can potentially raise your bad cholesterol levels, because you are using your cholesterol to produce more bile in your stomach, which is one of the reasons why increasing your fiber intake, particularly from things like oatmeals, Metamucil, things like that, can actually bind to that stomach bile and pull it out of your body to get it to come back down to a normal level. But these proton pump inhibitors, like omeprazole, the things that they have kind of found in more recent years, and I think that there is still more study that needs to come of it, but there are like kind of these yellowish red flags coming up, which is that when you take these, they reduce your ability to uptake calcium. Calcium, obviously, is going to increase your risk of osteoporosis when you don't have enough calcium uptake. But the other thing that can happen is that we've seen it start to lead potentially to dementia. So we're not sure what the mechanism is they're not sure as far as what the mechanism is that's causing dementia, but long-term use of omeprazole is, which is Prilosec, by the way, is associated with that risk. There was ranitidine for a while as well. That one was pulled off because there were some carcinogens found in the mix, and so they didn't want to keep it on the shelf. They felt that the risk was too high, and so. You know, right now the one that I am taking is Famotine. It is much weaker than, so that's your Pepcid, by the way. It's much weaker than the other things that are out there, such as the omeprazole, but it's also lower risk. And so there are certain things that you can be doing in order to kind of reduce the amount of inflammation that you have in your stomach that leads to gastritis and digestive issues. One is to sleep elevated. So you can just stack pillows on your bed to kind of get your, throat higher than your stomach. That kind of stops the acid from working its way back up. And it also, you can get a bed that elevates up, and there are also wedge pillows that you can buy that will create the same effect. So that kind of elevation might help. It will also help with sleep apnea. So if that's something that you're struggling with, that's something that can definitely help. And so, you know, we can also look at dietary factors that might be contributing to acid reflux and or even I don't want to say Crohn's disease or IBS, because that's a very, very prescriptive thing that's going on there that I have less experience with. But one of the ways that they might actually address these things, if there is a food issue, there are two ways that they can go about it. One is going to be an elimination diet, which means that you are going to take any types of possible aggravating food out of your diet. Probably go a couple weeks to a month without those foods in your diet, and then you kind of introduce them one at a time back into your diet to find out which ones are actually aggravating, which ones are not, and see if your symptoms come back, or see if the cutting them out of your diet is actually leading to a positive result. I will mention also, while I'm looking here at my home bar, that alcohol can be an aggravator for all kinds of stomach issues. And so the other thing that they can do besides the elimination diet, and both of these methods, both the elimination diet and the low FODMAP diet, are going to be things that are going to totally mess with your balance of nutrients that you're taking into your body. So you can actually find that, you know, you might have other symptoms that come up when you go onto these diets, and then you can have like nutrient deficiencies and whatnot that you have to play catch up on. And we much rather get your nutrients in through food than through supplementation. So looking at the low FODMAP diet, what the low FODMAP diet is that these are, FODMAPs are foods that I believe cause a certain level of fermentation within your diet, into your stomach, that can actually cause stomach upset and a host of other issues. And so it is basically a kind of very specific elimination diet where you have a list of a lot of things that you cannot eat. And my advice to you is, if you are going to go onto a low FODMAP diet, rather than paying attention to what you can't eat, I would get a low FODMAP cookbook, and then I would like collect all the different recipes or all the ingredients for all the recipes that I need, and kind of plan out my meals for, you know, a week at a time, and just cook from the cookbook. And then you're going to be on a low FODMAP diet without having to stress about, okay, what can I eat, what can I not eat? And when I had to go through that personally, you know, a lot of it was just like, okay, cut out this, this, and this, and it's just like, oh my God, there's so much here. What can I eat? What can I not eat? And so going the other route, where it is just you have a menu to choose from and you're choosing off that menu, that is going to be the easiest way, in my opinion, to be able to follow the low FODMAP diet and adhere to it for the longest period of time. And you may find that you have to get more than one cookbook, because sometimes they can be a little bit on the bland side. So flip through those, find the ones that work for you, and remember that it's not a long-term thing. In fact, if you are having to consider going on a low FODMAP diet, try to have a GI doctor or your PCP or a nutritionist involved in that, or registered dietitian rather, in that decision-making process to make sure it's right for you, know how to get on and off of the diet, because again, we're going to have to reintroduce foods to you. Other foods that can be aggravating, obviously, would be your spicy foods and things like that. Fried foods can be very, very aggravating to you. And so, you know, it's controversial because we have this list of like oils that you can fry in and oils that you can't fry in, as far as like, what kind of unsaturated fats are in there, whether they're monounsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats, how high the flash point is can affect how healthy an oil is for you and how inflammatory it will be to your body. So if you're cooking with extra virgin olive oil on the stove, you're probably introducing yourself to some unhealthinesses. You need to go with like a light olive oil if you're going to be using an olive oil at all. I personally cook with avocado oil because it has a flash point of 500 degrees, and to the best of my knowledge, it is there are no health issues that come along with it. But when you are deep frying food, the food will actually tend to absorb a lot of that oil, especially if it's breaded or battered in any way, shape, or form. French fries, things like that, absorbs those oils. And then since your bile is made out of oil, basically, you are just adding more fat to the fire. And that's going to make things a little bit worse. So I would avoid fried food if you can help it, just because those are going to be things that are going to be more aggravating to your gut lining. So try to eat plenty of fiber coming from whole food sources. So when we say whole foods, and I just saw a video on eating clean actually that I got the guy's point, and I agree with it. And I also disagree with it because he says, you ask 10 people about what eating clean means, and you'll get 10 different responses. And though that's somewhat true, it's also somewhat false. And let me kind of clarify when I say eating clean, what that actually means. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you go to the store and you're looking at a label and you're like, okay, I want to just have as few ingredients in here as possible. Sometimes the ingredients that you see breads, for example, fortified with, are oftentimes vitamins and minerals that are actually lacking in a lot of people's diets. So there was actually good intention behind that. So you have to, if you see an ingredient that you don't know what it is, you kind of have to look up what that ingredient is and kind of understand what its purpose is, rather than being scared by a scientific name being on a food label, if that makes sense. So going further into that, so yes, I personally, when I eat bread, it's usually going to be Dave's Killer Bread, for the reason that when I look at the label, it's a pretty simple thing. It's not some weird science experiment going on here. Bread's generally not that harmful. A lot of times you find mono and diglycerides in bread. You can find shortenings in bread and whatnot that is a saturated fat or a trans fat that you don't necessarily need in your body, and it's not really necessary to make the bread good anyways. It makes it more shelf stable. I might look at sodium content. Sometimes they can have higher sodium contents. So bread, it's one of those things, but chips are a lot more egregious, and for me, my body is like just so hypersensitive to whatever I put into it that like if I have anything more than just a plain tortilla chip, it can be aggravating for me. Doritos are aggravating now; they didn't used to be. Cheetos, absolutely. Lay's are the worst. Kettle chips, all of them are going to just piss off my stomach, and it's going to affect my training. So when we say, eat clean, that's going to be like, try to focus, you look at your plate and like at least a third to half of your plate is going to be veggies for both lunch and dinner, probably fruit in the morning, things like that, having fruit and veggies throughout the day as well. That's going to make you feel a whole lot better. Not doing too much protein, although when it comes to a discussion on gut health, protein doesn't weigh too much into it. I don't know of too much gut aggravation that comes from protein sources. Certainly you can have some farting or something like that if you're lactose intolerant or something like that, but that's not the protein doing it. And I do want to actually go back to lactose intolerance really quick, because I forgot about one detail, is that when you take lactase, the enzyme, it tells your body to produce less lactase, so you can become more lactose intolerant than you were when you began if you use lactase. So if you're going to be drinking milk, you want to go ahead and buy one that has already been treated with lactase, because it's going to break down the lactose that's in there. So your body's not really getting introduced to that lactose or the lactase in the same way. So it's going to contribute to your lactose intolerance less. and then if you can talk to your doctor about the new research that's coming out about introducing bacteria into your gut that will eat the lactose in your upper gut lining before it has a chance to get to the lower gut lining, where it's going to cause those issues. So that was just a little side note there. Other things that are going on here, when it comes to GI tract stuff, it is a complicated thing, and GI doctors are not great at putting their finger on exactly what it is, and maybe you need an allergist, maybe you don't. Maybe you need to do an elimination diet, maybe you don't. It's not something that you want to, kind of go in blind, and you kind of do want to have a doctor involved if you're having any major upsets. And don't do an elimination if you really don't need to, because the problem with just saying I'm not going to do this, or I'm just not going to eat this, and you don't have any scientific foundation for not eating this, you're just like, I hear that gluten's bad for you, so I'm going to stop eating gluten. I know we've gone full circle. You are cutting out so many foods that have so many nutrients that would be beneficial to you, and you're just making yourself more miserable by eliminating those, and they might not even be the cause. You might have a parasite, you might have H. pylori, you might be eating way too close to bed. It should be about an hour and a half to 2 to maybe even 3 hours between your last meal and the time that you go to bed. I have a little cup of Chobani low sugar yogurt, so it doesn't have any artificial sweeteners in it. It's just not as sweet as the regular stuff, and it's like half as much sugar. I have that right before bed because it helps me settle my stomach, and it's such a light thing that it's not going to upset my stomach while I sleep. Whereas if you're having peanuts right before bed, yes, the satiety is going to be off the charts. Peanut butter is one of the worst things you could have right before bed, and I've seen online recommendations for having peanut butter right before bed to keep you full all night if you have issues waking up in the middle of the night and needing to snack in the middle of the night. Peanut butter is sludgy, like how hard it is to move out of your mouth. That's how hard it is for your gut to move it. And it's also a nut, so it's actually harder for your body to break down. So, you think about this big lump of something that's sitting in your gut that your gut is struggling to move while you're laying down. Not really the best thing. And so, you can keep a food diary to kind of try to figure out what are the things that are aggravating you. That is not necessarily a bad strategy, but I would present that to your GI doctor what your theories are, what seems to be aggravating, what seems not to be aggravating, because that might be saying, what these all have in common is that these are all FODMAPs, and so maybe you need to do the low FODMAP diet to rebalance your gut. Maybe you need to be drinking more. Maybe it's a dehydration issue, which reminds me, my client today had asked me about, because he saw on TikTok, which is a terrible place to get information, just like YouTube. And the TikTok said that you need to be putting a little bit of salt in your water every time you drink it, otherwise you're going to have a electrolyte imbalance. I shot that down quite a bit. What she's referring to in that TikTok is what's called hyponatremia. It is something that happens when you run a marathon, or you do CrossFit or things like that, where you are sweating a lot, you're exerting yourself really hard for a long period of time, and then you're drinking a lot of water without electrolytes in it. And you sweat out all your electrolytes, the water will oversaturate your cells, pull the electrolytes out, and then you die from it. And it's not really, for general people, it's not that high of a risk. It's usually there's an activity associated with that. So you probably do not need to be adding salt into your water. Creating your own home Gatorade that's low sugar or whatever, might not be a bad idea for when you're working out, but it depends on how much sweat loss that you're getting and how much water you're taking in. So it's really about that fluid exchange. And if your doctor has done a test for your electrolytes, usually it's going to be a blood test, and they see that your electrolytes are all out of whack, then maybe you do need to put a little bit of salt in your water, or potassium, or any number of whatever electrolytes are out of whack. That might be something that you need to do in that case, but in that case you have scientific evidence that says, hey, you are lacking in this nutrient. So you need to be getting it into your system. But for the general population, putting salt in your water, salt is one of the most over consumed nutrients in the American population at least, and I would guess it would be worldwide too. So adding more salt to your diet is probably not the best idea, especially, you know, it can make it so that you have more buildup in your kidneys of oxalate and calcium, which can lead to calcium oxalate kidney stones. It can give you a higher risk of uric acid kidney stones, or any number of kidney stones really, because you're not processing enough water through your kidneys to actually flush all that out, is how I basically understand it. But so high, and there's also hypertension that comes along with that. So, you know, I would not increase your sodium intake unless you have a tested reason why that is now required. So I hope this helps as far as gut health goes. And it is a big topic. I thought I would be able to get through it better in this amount of in a single video, but I'm not sure that I really did, because there are definitely things when we're talking about gut health when it comes to rolling. And making sure that we are, like, for one, spacing out when we are drinking a lot of water to usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours before we work out. Maybe we need to have about 12 to 16 ounces of water, so that when we roll, we're not waterlogged from that. You know, nothing's worse than knee ride or body scissors or something like that when you've just chugged, you know, 2 Gatorades or whatever. So, you know, having too much water, that can cause stomach upsets. That can also, you know, push your bile back up because you now have fluid taking up that space. You know, how soon before or after you eat, before you roll, that's another thing that can upset you. So we can spend some more time with this if that's what's desired amongst the community, so that we can have some better answers as far as, you know, what are the best things to do for your gut health. And I know that I have just not covered the full spectrum of everything out of there because I am not a gastroenterologist. I'm not an allergist. You know, I didn't even touch on the new trend, which is histamine in food, which I don't quite understand yet. So when I get more information on that, I'll report back to you guys. But so a lot to cover here, a lot more to cover, and I hope this is helpful for you guys. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, let me know, and I will respond to it later. Okay.